Welcome to Preventing Workplace Harassment for Managers and Supervisors. In this training, we will define harassment, look about what a respectful work environment should be like. We will examine the different types of harassment, understand what to do when it occurs, focus in on the manager's responsibilities and ways to protect yourself. So, harassment is a form of employment discrimination and it violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It deals with age discrimination as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those are the grounds under which harassment can become a legal issue. Harassment is that unwelcome conduct that is based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, and genetic information. Harassment becomes unlawful where it becomes an enduring offense of conduct and it becomes a condition of continued employment, or the conduct is so severe or pervasive enough to create a work environment that a reasonable person would consider intimidating, hostile, or abusive. So, a hostile work environment, it doesn't benefit anyone. The prevention or elimination of harassment falls as everyone's responsibility. So let's focus in on how to address harassment by examining the types. You have sexual harassment, which most of us have heard about. We have quid pro quo, which you don't hear about as often. Hostile work environment, bullying in the workplace, as well as third-party harassment. So, with sexual harassment, it deals with submission to the conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of the individual's continued employment. The conduct is unwelcome, unwanted, offensive, and has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with the individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Quid pro quo, basically something given in exchange for something else. So you could have a supervisor telling a subordinate employee that if he or she accompanies them, meaning the supervisor, for a weekend getaway, the supervisor might be able to arrange some paid time off for the employee, or maybe they can look into that long desired promotion. The key is a person in authority is threatening something over the employee's head for something else. Simple as that. Hostile work environment. The behavior that constitutes or makes it hostile, it means that the behavior altered the terms, conditions, and or reasonable expectations of a comfortable work environment for employees. We're not talking about like, oh, it's got to be so cushy and everything's got to be sweet, sweet. But these are behaviors and actions and communications that are discriminatory in nature. A hostile work environment can be created by the boss, by coworkers. It can be created by anyone, and it could be about the way you talk, the way you behave. These things that you're doing could make it impossible for someone else to feel as if they could do their job. Some examples would be degrading comments, sexual propositions, embarrassing questions. There's a certain political person that had to recently resign because of some invasive and embarrassing questions. Um, Sexual jokes, bullying. All of these things can constitute a hostile work environment. Now, bullying in the workplace. You might say, bullying? Well, we're not in high school. Well, a bully can still exist in the workplace. This is somebody who is just mean and cruel to another person in the workplace. The things that they are doing are reprehensible, and they cause the other person to feel put upon, put down, and typically the person picks on somebody who is seemingly weaker. When you allow this to continue, it can affect the morale of the workplace. It could cause low productivity. The impact can be very detrimental, not just to the employee, but to the bottom line of the company. 35% of workers feel bullied at work, and about 16% say they suffer health problems because of being bullied. 17% will actually quit their jobs instead of addressing it, instead of telling anybody, or they could tell somebody and feel like it didn't help. They will just quit. 61% of targets reported bullying from people in more senior positions. Hard to tell on the boss to the boss. All right. Most bullying is same-sex harassing, and a lot of that is hard. It falls sometimes in that gray area or in between the cracks of the laws that we talked about, that Title VII, and the things related to age or sex discrimination, because you have two people the same gender, and so it's hard to kind of look for the legal reason why it's wrong. But it doesn't matter. If it causes a untenable work situation and the person feels that they have been discriminated against or made to feel that they're in a hostile work setting, you still have to address it. 70% of the perpetrators are men, and 67% of all reported bullying is woman on woman. That's status blind harassment once again. Let's look at it a little bit further. So the female perpetrator and female target is, like it says, about 67%, where male perpetrator, male target is only 35%. However, male to female is higher than female to male, but female to female is the highest at that 67%. All of it is difficult, and all of it counts. It all matters. So, third party harassment, like quid pro quo, you might not hear about it as often, but it's behavior not found offensive by some employees, but someone else that could be within hearing range or within the vicinity could hear this conversation and it could offend them. So you could say, for an example, a group of employees are talking about each other's sex lives in the presence of another person who feels very uncomfortable about hearing that type of conversation in the work setting. And you can be reported for that. So, what to do? Any employee who believes that they have been subjected to discrimination or harassment, sexual harassment, any kind, we say start at the lowest level. If appropriate, approach the person and ask them to stop. Um, if for some reason you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you can report the behavior to your immediate supervisor, another supervisor, or that individual supervisor. But the thing is, report it, say something, don't just ignore it. And as managers and supervisors, you have to be prepared to respond. Why is it important for employees to report discrimination, workplace harassment, and sexual harassment? You would think that's not a question we have to ask, but we do, because sometimes people say, why make a big deal out of it? Well, discrimination, workplace harassment, and sexual harassment, they can cause emotional harm. As we said, it can affect productivity, it can increase absenteeism. Um, Employees can become fearful of other workers, and workplace morale can be negatively impacted if these types of behaviors go unchecked. So, what do? Why do employees hesitate to report it? A lot of them fear that they could lose their job, they fear retaliation. A lot of times they want the behavior to stop. They're not necessarily even trying to get someone in trouble. They don't want to disrupt the workplace. They don't want to be embarrassed by it. And one of the biggest things is they don't feel that they will be believed. So, some of the things that someone struggling with this could do is be assertive, because when you're assertive, you're going to address the situation. You're not going to let those fears and those other concerns stop you from addressing it. You can check with somebody else and get somebody else's opinion as to what to do, how to handle it. Definitely, it's a good thing to document, keeping a diary to memorialize incidents that have occurred. Um, Performance reviews as a supervisor, this is something that will kick in for you, is that when these incidents occur, you need to make sure that a person who's bullying and being hostile, that if they're still getting stellar performance ratings, that's a problem, because their behavior has negatively impacted the workplace. And that matters because it's going to ultimately impact the whole mission and the morale of the organization. And you need to know when to refer people to counseling. We're letting them know about concern and the options and the things that we have to offer to help them through situations. So these are some of the things you need to remember, not just for the employee who's being victimized to do, but things you can do as well. If harassment continues, definitely tell them to tell someone. After it's been reported, does that mean that it's over? No. Even though there's not supposed to be retaliation, and even though whatever measures have been put in place, they've been made an FMR, whatever, that doesn't mean that it will stop. You need to reassure the person that they can still come back to you. You can tell them they can put it in writing to you if they're not comfortable being seen coming to your office. If they need to file an even more formal complaint, these are things that you want to be able to reassure them of, advise them of, um, and to kind of let them know that it matters. So, as a manager, Part of your role is going to be to guard against retaliation. Don't let an employee be iced out or left out or feel some kind of way about what has happened. You got to handle the investigation as discreetly and confidentially as possible. It's got to be left on a need to know basis as far as who's involved. You definitely cannot 100% control what the parties involved will do and who they will tell, but you've got to discourage them to let them know. I cannot guarantee confidentiality outside of me knowing who I'm not going to tell. But if you tell one other person about this, then you have broken the confidentiality of this process and investigation. So put the onus back on them to also know it's not just about who you're going to tell, because even if they confide in that close friend or coworker, once they have told that person is free to tell others, and confidentiality has been breached, and that cannot be blamed just upon you. You know that you're not able to go outside of the guise of who you're supposed to report it to, but you can't control all factors. So make them have a buy-in to the role of confidentiality as well. Make sure that you're sensitive to all feelings involved. Um, you know that to make a complaint is a big deal. So the accused is going to feel the weight of this as well as the person who's making the complaint. So handle it with due diligence and care, because these are lives, hearts, and minds and families involved in this process. As a manager and supervisor, you've got to set an example. You've got to be respectful. You've got to exhibit the worst workplace behavior that you are desiring from others. And you've got to have clear expectations and let everybody know that discrimination will not be allowed, harassment will not be allowed, it won't be tolerated. And as you see in this image, the leader is leading, because if you're doing right, they're getting the example of the right thing to do. But realize if you are part of the problem, you're letting them know that they can follow that example as well. So make sure that you're taking immediate steps to address appropriate behavior and conduct when it occurs. Encourage it to be reported. You make sure you do your part in the reporting process. And make sure you have a clear mechanism in place for reporting. People shouldn't have to ask 4 or 5 people to find out what that process is. Your policy should be on a board in a room where they can easily see it. It shouldn't take them an hour to go through. The reporting process could be its own individual flyer, if that includes HR, if that includes the supervisor, if there is a reporting officer. Put those things out there clear, where when somebody is dealing with something, they don't have to search it out and find it. Make sure the workers are aware that HR is always an option where they can go if they don't choose to go to their supervisor or manager, or if unfortunately the supervisor or manager is the one they are reporting. So you definitely have to know your sexual harassment policy, and you have to make sure that you keep the employees informed of the policy, and you communicate the proper procedures if they're going to file a complaint. You want to make sure that the lines of communication are open yet confidential. You want to make sure that you act immediately if you suspect a harassment situation. Remember, you can be an observer of something that's not reported. And it's definitely okay and encouraged, because even though you may think they don't see you, if you're in a vicinity and anybody sees you and the incident goes unreported, unchecked, uninvestigated, then that makes you culpable. So you want to make sure that if you see something, you too say something. So make sure that you are part of the solution and not part of the problem. You want to make sure you're accurately documented any suspected incidents because the paper trail, timelines, all of those things matter. Who else was around? Are there witnesses? All of those things matter. You want to report concerns and complaints to the appropriate departments. You want to listen seriously to all harassment complaints. The way you show up and listen is not just about the things that you say. Your nonverbals will send a message to the complainant as well. So be mindful of your facial expressions, your body language. If someone is telling you a complaint and you've got your arms across your chest, that's a closed off stance and it doesn't say, I'm listening and I care. If you are looking around at other people while the person is talking and not providing good eye contact, that nonverbal says, I'm not focused on you and what you're saying doesn't really matter. But also go to a place. If they approach you in an open space and start to have a conversation and you see where it's going, as soon as you know, and you might say, hey, is this something that you're okay with other people hearing? If not, let's go over here and let's have the conversation over here. And if you need to pull another supervisor in with you to have that conversation, definitely do that. There is no problem with adding someone as a witness if you're concerned about you being accused of something. It's good to encourage employees to all say no to harassing behavior. No one should see it and do nothing. You should see it and say something. But a big part of the process that needs to be upheld and reinforced is asking everybody to keep it confidential. Everybody doesn't need to know that Joe has been accused of harassing Sally. Everybody doesn't need to know that Mary has been accused of inappropriate behavior with Joe. Learn how to investigate and do what you need to do, but keep it confidential. So protecting yourself, I talked about bringing the other supervisor in on the reporting conversation. But some basic things for yourself and things you can tell your employees is make sure you always keep your hands to yourself. Horseplay in a work setting is not a good thing. It should not be allowed. It should not happen. We're adults, we're not kids. Um, with these things coming to the surface, patting someone on their butt, any kind of unwanted touching is assault. That's the law. Unwanted touch is assault. So keep your hands to yourself. Um, don't talk about sex on the job, not meaning about having sex on the job, but don't talk about your sexcapades or whatever is going on in your intimate life. The workplace is not the place to have that conversation. Even in the lunchroom, if it's a community area, other people can overhear your conversation and be offended. So it's better to not have that conversation. Never mix social life with job related discussions. So it says never. We're human. We do have relationships outside the job, and sometimes those relationships are with coworkers and colleagues. But once again, you open the door for someone else to accuse you of something. So if they know that you hang out with Sam outside of work and Sam gets this promotion, then all of a sudden there's favoritism that you have given. So just err on the side of keeping it about business and work at work. Keep any compliments casual and fairly impersonal. Once again, you know, you got to be careful that your words, even though your intention is not to offend, it can be offensive. So to say, oh, you really look good today, nice compliment, tone is a little risque and inappropriate. So, you know, keep the compliments about the work. It's what I say instead of about the person. Keep it about the work, and that should keep you in a safe zone. You don't have to comment on somebody's hair or their complexion or their outfit because you're putting yourself once again in the line of fire to be accused of crossing a line. So just because Sarah is okay with that type of conversation doesn't mean Sally is. So keep it about the work. Avoid jokes and words and phrases and gestures that have sexual meanings. That should be something we shouldn't even have to say, but because it's part of the policy, that means that somebody's done it. And you got to respect a person's personal space, especially in these times of COVID, but just regardless, the boundary that she's drawing around her, literally, they say arms stretched all the way out to your side, end to end, draw a circle around yourself, and that's your personal space. That's your bubble. You know, make sure people are not getting in your bubble and make sure you're not getting in anybody else's bubble. I don't know if you guys remember the close talker on Seinfeld. Nobody needs a close talker, especially not now. Let's keep our distance and let's value everybody's personal space, not just social distancing space, but their personal space too, which the two kind of coincide. Um, Seductive behavior. So if someone is coming on to you in the workplace, you have a choice to respond and have some questionable things be suggested and said, or to just not respond. Not You don't have to respond to seductive behavior with a seductive response. You can keep it professional. You can make sure that you are staying above the fray. Respectful behavior facilitates more productive employees, and it also promotes more respectful behavior. So now we're going to get into a part of what we call the scenarios. So during this time, we are going to read the scenarios, and they will be up on the screen for you to read along. And then we're going to answer the questions. If this wasn't a recorded session, it would be interactive and I would get your feedback. But I would tell you just to continue to have conversations about the scenarios even after this training is concluded. So let's go. So, scenario number one. Jessica is a longtime employee who works in the call center. She goes up to a new male employee, Sean, who works in the safety department, and she asks him if he is single. He says that he is single, but her question has made him uncomfortable. She then tells him she is single as well, introduces herself, and says that she would love to get to know him better. Jessica is not Sean's type at all. Sean says he is not looking for a relationship right now, but he hopes they can be friends. She frowns and walks away. Jessica is crushed and angry. When she goes back to her department, she tells the other women to steer clear of the new guy, Sean, because he seems like a pervert. They say, "Oh, really? What happened?" She makes up a story about him undressing her with his eyes, invading her personal space, almost touching her, then asking her out, which made her uncomfortable. Cheryl, who has been the victim of sexual harassment, tells Jessica that she needs to report this. Jessica says she does not want to make a big deal out of it. Cheryl tries to encourage her to say something, but to no avail. However, Cheryl can't let it go. So she goes to their supervisor, unbeknownst to Jessica, and tells her what happened with even more vigor and embellishment. All right. So, did any harassment take place? Let's look at it. First, at the person who's being accused, Sean. Sean did nothing wrong. He just rebuffed someone he was not interested in, and that is not harassment. And for that, he should not be dragged into a case by a disgruntled other person, which would be Jessica. So, on Jessica's part, did she harass anyone? Well, her behavior could be said as being questionable in asking him out, but that's about it. No harm, no foul. If she had just moved on and let it be that he wasn't interested, she would have clean hands. However, she goes back and lies on Sean. That is a problem. Is Cheryl guilty of anything? Well, it's not nice that she embellished the story even more when she retold it to the supervisor, but she does not get penalized for that. She's operating on good faith that what Jessica has told her is true. So, did any harassment take place? Not really. However, because there has been a lie told and someone else is going to be put into a situation to do something about it, I would say Jessica could be in trouble for sure. What, if anything, should the supervisor do? Investigate. It's time to kick off an investigation to see who has done what. Now, this is an investigation I would surely like to see and follow. However, we have to move on to the next scenario, and we will not know what happened to these characters. But should anyone be in trouble? I would say yes. Jessica needs to be pulled to the carpet to have to answer for her lying on someone. Who knows how this could impact Sean and his future? So, yes, Jessica should be in trouble. All right, let's go to the next scenario. John hates speaking in front of people. He has to provide an informal update to his coworkers on a project. John is dreading doing this for many reasons. He is very self conscious about his height and weight. He has been teased about it for most of his life. Most times he just laughs with people so he does not feel like they are just laughing at him. However, there is a new coworker that seems to go too far with the teasing. He even gets a little physical by pushing and shoving. John does not want to make a big deal about it, but he is really getting tired of it. After giving his update to the group, the new guy pops John on the back of his head and says, "Thanks for the update, Curly." And everyone laughs. John is demoralized and decides he has to do something. All right. What are some options for John? Well, John could go to this coworker and try to have a conversation. That's that lowest level of reporting. However, from what I'm hearing about this guy, he might not be the kind of person that John can have a conversation with that would net any benefit. So John could also go to his immediate supervisor, or he could go to the coworker supervisor, or a supervisor that's neutral and not responsible to either one of them. But he could go directly to HR. So John has options. What, if any, type of harassment is this? Well, it's definitely a hostile work environment. And I would say that his teasing and his putting his hands on him is equates to some bullying. Now, one of the things that this story said was that John has been self-conscious about his height and his weight, and this coworker calls him Curly. And if we know Curly from the Three Stooges, he had a bald head and he was a little bit overweight. So you could be looking at him being harassed based on his physical appearance, and that would be a problem as well. So if a supervisor saw this happen, saw John being popped on the back of the head by this other guy, what, if anything, should the supervisor do? So what the supervisor has witnessed, even if he didn't hear what happened, that's physical touch, right? Popping him on the back of the head. And I would say at a minimum, he needs to pull John to the side and have a conversation to see how John felt about that, or pull the coworker aside and say, hey, that's not allowed. We can't just assume that John is okay with you hitting him. So it could be handled there, and John would have to do nothing if a supervisor witnessed it. So let's move on to scenario number 3. Jerry is a longtime employee who works in IT. He goes up to a new female employee, Sarah, who works in the marketing department, and he asks to take her out to lunch one day. She declines, saying she usually brings her lunch. The next day, Jerry brings her flowers, and she tells him thanks for the gesture, but she's allergic and maybe he can give them to someone else. A few days later, Jerry brings her a box of candy and says everybody likes chocolates. Sarah said she does, but she's on a diet. Jerry looks her up and down and says, your body is perfect. You do not need to lose 1 ounce. This comment makes Sarah feel uncomfortable, but she's speechless and just excuses herself and goes into the bathroom to pull herself together. Kim, a coworker, comes in and sees that she is upset. Sarah shares what Jerry has done, and Kim says, oh, he tries to date all the new workers. Just hang in there. He will leave you alone in a few weeks. Sarah is now angry because she feels she should not have this for one day, let alone a few weeks. Sarah decides to go to her supervisor for help. Now, let's see what our questions are. What, if anything, should the supervisor do? So Sarah retells the incident to the supervisor, and the supervisor, at a minimum, should probably speak to Jerry's supervisor. In this incident, I think Jerry needs to be given a warning. I don't even know if it necessarily needs to be written at this point, but the looking her up and down, the sexual connotation that you don't need to lose 1 ounce has, that's the part where he's crossed the line. The continued pestering her with gifts and trying to get her to soften her stance of saying she wasn't interested can be harassing. So he needs to be told about his behavior, not just for the sake of Sarah, but for every new worker that comes behind Sarah. And what about Kim, the worker who has told Sarah, oh, he does that to everybody? If somebody had said something sooner, maybe Jerry could have stopped this behavior sooner. Should Jerry's supervisor be advised about what is going on and let them handle it? Of course. Um, if Sarah's supervisor is from um, another department, the marketing department, and Jerry is from IT, they can have two different supervisors. So yes, that would be the best way for Sarah's supervisor to handle it. Or Sarah's supervisor could take it straight to HR and let them reach out to Jerry's supervisor. What, if any, type of harassment is this? Well, this is definitely can check the box of sexual harassment because of the sexual connotation of the things he said and did. It could be hostile work environments because of the ongoing attempts. And to say that she didn't let him know she wasn't interested, she kind of did. She tried to do it in a nice way. Maybe she could have been more blunt, but I'm not sure if that would have deterred Jerry. So those are the things. It's not any kind of quid pro quo because he's not in a position of authority. He was not bargaining for her to do something and he would do that. He didn't get to that space. So it's sexual harassment and possible hostile work environment going on there. All right. So we're going to move to our last and final scenario. John has to do a presentation at work. There's one member on his team that always makes sarcastic, off topic comments at his expense after the presentation. The other employees always laugh and sometimes even chime in, and John feels like he is the butt of the joke. John struggles with self-esteem issues because he used to stutter as a child, but years of speech therapy helped him get over it. Also, John has a child in middle school diagnosed with Asperger's disorder that gets teased and bullied. He is so concerned about his son's future and what life holds for him. Today is not a good day already, and he is not sure he can take being made fun of today or ever again. The team member is in a lower management position than John is, but is not a subordinate and works in another department altogether. Once John finishes the presentation, the team member has everyone laughing. John decides that he has to do something. So let's see what our questions are. What are some options for John? Well, since this person is in a lower management position, but not a subordinate, John could feel as if he could pull the person aside and go to him directly and have that conversation. John could choose to go straight to HR and let them handle it. John could reach out to the other person's supervisor because chances are they may be on the same management level and have his supervisor handle it. Or John could go to his own supervisor and let him know of the difficulties and let it be handled at an even higher level. What, if any, type of harassment is this? Well, once again, you're looking at possible bullying and hostile work environment. The thing is that this other person is probably clueless as to the other factors going on in John's life that makes him hypersensitive to the way he's making fun of him. and to the way he is making him sort of the butt of the joke. Um, but should we need to know all that information to show up in the workplace in a way that doesn't offend and hurt someone else? I say not. Um, it would be nice if he knew that, but he shouldn't have to know all of that information to show up as a good person that's not making jokes at another person's expense. So those are the boxes that I would say is being checked as related to the type of harassment this is. And I think when you look at this scenario and even some of the other scenarios, they provide background information that we typically may not be privy to, but we should not need that information to do the right thing. But just know what you see on the surface is just that, on the surface. We have no idea the layers and other things going on in people's lives when we choose to check the box of any type of harassment or discrimination. All right, let's close this out. So, together we must work to create and maintain a work environment that is free of workplace harassment. The simple golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, will go a long way to help us move past this type of behavior in the workplace. It's just the first step. It's not all the steps, but it is a good first step in the process. So, if you have questions about anything that we discuss during this training, please feel free to email me at concern@bmhcc.org. Also, if you need to be able to have a certificate of completion for this training to document it, then email me and I will send you a brief quiz that you can take, and then I will send you a certificate to say that you have completed the training. Um, Hopefully, this will check the box to just be able to document that you have viewed it. But if you need something more, please email me and we can make that happen as well. Let's talk about concern and the role that it can play for you as a supervisor or manager. So, as a supervisor or manager, you may very well have someone who has dealt with harassment or some other life stressor, and they may need to be referred to concern as a recommendation, a suggestion. Know that it's confidential for them and anyone in their household. Know that no issue is too big or too small. But also, not just for them, but for you as well. In addition, if you find yourself needing to investigate or be involved with an employee that you are supervising or managing that has either been the victim or the perpetrator of some type of harassment, you may want to mandate counseling for them if what is going on has impacted their ability to keep their job, or it has impacted the work environment in a way that has been detrimental, and you need some type of consequence, or you need to make sure they get some type of counseling. You can make them a formal management referral. The process to do that has been streamlined because you can go to www.myconcerneap.com and fill out the FMR paperwork online and upload the signed release forms to start the process for an FMR. It will be upon the client once those paperworks have been submitted with all the proper signed forms, to call us to schedule an appointment to start that FMR process, okay? But that website has a tab that says managers or supervisors, and that's where you can find that FMR paperwork. The only caveat and the difference is them coming to concern is no longer confidential as far as you knowing that they have come. What you don't get to know is what happens once they come. All you will be told is they are in compliance with treatment recommendations or they are in non-compliance. That is all you will get to know. So knowing that information can help you to still reassure the client that the process is still confidential, except you sent them there. So the fact that they are a concerned client is not confidential. That's the only part. But you never get to know what's going on in their sessions. Another thing as a manager or supervisor, it's good for you to know about concern is that the report that you all get as an employer only shows a numerical number of how many employees have accessed the benefit as well as how many dependents. It never gives any name, never gives any identifying information. So once again, it is very confidential. So they can rest assured and have peace of mind to know that if they come to concern, that they can have privacy and it is a safe place. Okay. And if you're not sure that what's going on is applicable to the services that we have at Concern, just call us anyway and we'll help you figure it out. So I hope that this training has been helpful to those who are listening to it. And once again, if you have questions, you can give us a call. You can contact us through the My Concern EAP website, or you can email us at concern at bmhcc.org. Thank you so much for participating in this training. And I hope that you have a great rest of the day, as well as success, making sure that you prevent any form of harassment or discrimination in your workplace. And that as a manager or a supervisor, that you are setting an example that is worth following. Thank you so much and have a great day.